Hello. This video will explain how to find and correct one of the most common errors in writing, the use of the passive voice. If you've ever taken an English class, you have likely been told to eliminate passive voice from your writing, but this can be easier said than done. This video will give tips for both locating passive voice in your writing and correcting it once it is found. Before we learn how to find and correct passive voice, we first must learn what it is. In a normal active voice sentence, the subject performs the action of the verb. In a passive voice sentence, the subject instead has the verb performed upon them. For example, in the sentence, "The dog barked," the subject dog performs the action of barking. This is active voice. In the sentence, "The dog was adopted," the dog is not doing the adopting, but rather is having the adopting done to them. Passive voice makes your writing sound weak because the subject is not actually performing the action, but rather having things done to them. Passive voice can also lack clarity because the noun which does perform the verb is often missing from the sentence. Such as, in our example, "The dog was adopted." We don't get to learn who adopted the dog here, and in formal writing, this missing information often becomes problematic. Now that we know what passive voice is, we need to learn how to locate it in our writing. The first thing to look for when trying to find passive voice is a verb with two parts. Passive voice verbs always have a helping verb and a main verb. The helping verb will be a to be verb, such as was, are, were, has, or have. The main verb will always be a verb in the past tense. So in our examples, "The bear was found in the cave," was is the helping verb and found is the main verb. You can tell this is passive because the bear is not performing the action of finding, but rather is being found. In our other example, "They are trapped by the storm," are is the helping verb and trapped is the main verb. Again, you can tell this is passive because they are not doing the trapping, but rather are being trapped. Now that you have the basics, here are some further tips for finding passive voice. Remember that a passive verb will always have both a helping verb and a main verb. To be verbs can stand on their own, such as in "The dog was black." Here, there is a to be verb, but there is no other verb accompanying it, so it cannot be passive. "The dog was adopted" is passive because it has both a helping verb and a main verb. Another quick trick to make sure something is passive is to add the word being between the helping and main verb. If the sentence still makes sense, then it is passive. In our example, "The boy was jumping," if we add being, we get "the boy was being jumping." This makes no sense. However, in the sentence, "The boy was caught," if we add the word being, we get the boy was being caught, which still makes sense. This is a good tool to double check when you're unsure if something is passive. Now that you can find passive voice in your writing, you need to learn how to turn it into active voice. There are two ways to fix passive voice, either by changing the subject or the verb. Remember, passive voice is when the subject does not perform the verb, and the goal, therefore, is to get the subject and verb to match. To begin, you must ask yourself either, which noun is actually doing the verb, or what action is the subject actually doing? If we ask ourselves what noun is actually doing the verb, then we are trying to change the subject of the sentence to be the noun performing the action. In our example, "The boy was bitten by the dog," it is easy to determine what noun is performing the verb because it is in the sentence. In this case, we can flip the sentence around to say, "The dog bit the boy," thereby changing the subject and making it active. Sometimes this can be trickier when the noun performing the action is not already in the sentence, such as in, "The thief was pursued." Then we have to supply a new noun to make the subject of the sentence, such as, "The police pursued the thief." The other method is to change the verb by asking, what action is the subject actually doing? This often means asking what the verb means and trying to find another way to phrase it until you hit on an active synonym. For instance, in the sentence, "I was taught by the teacher," I am not teaching, so what am I doing? What does it mean to be taught? Well, it means to learn. Therefore, we can say, "I learned from the teacher," to make it active. For another example, "The girl was scared." What does it mean to be scared? It means you are afraid, which means you fear. Therefore, this sentence can become, "The girl feared." This method is often trickier at first, but can become quite useful with practice. Those are the basics of finding and correcting passive voice in your writing. Like most things, this takes practice to determine which method works best for you. And as a disclaimer, there are more complexities to passive voice which this video did not delve into. Hopefully, this was a useful video on the basics for those of you struggling to get rid of passive voice in your writing. Goodbye!